from Unknown Character, who said, "Is it wrong for me to feel I'll try Dragonflight at the end of the expansion, even though the alpha looks impressive so far?" Absolutely not. Like, that's totally reasonable. I mean, it just remains to be seen how much content there is. You know, like, there's all these big new reputations in this expansion, but we don't know how big they're going to be, right? There's, like, a lot of stuff that's just, you know, sort of up in the air. I guess in terms of, like, what do you miss out on if you join late? I suppose it's, like, you'll maybe face roll over some of the earlier content. You could say that. There's like a little bit of the FOMO of like not being there in the MMO when you're doing the stuff that's new, so you're just always in catch-up mode. Like maybe if some of the gameplay of an old zone, like an old patch zone, is really fun, when it's no longer relevant, maybe you'll just feel no reason to go there, and you'll feel like that was almost temporary snack food content. So hopefully they don't have that problem that they have tended to have before. But like, for most of the narrative content, like, yeah, you're totally fine to just come in at the end for a few months.
Well,
you could say the same for FF14 as well. Like, FF14 is a game you could just play every 2 years. Just, you know, pop a 2-month subscription so that you can play through, you know, the whole expansion's content, and like that's a valid enough way to play the game and see the story.
Yeah, well, I would actually offer a substantial disagreement to that, and that is to do with how, you know, it's almost like the thing that happens to the patient gamer, and it's the same thing that kind of happens with the difference that you see between like Netflix or Prime dumping a long show or releasing it weekly. And it's the kind of thing of the it's the kind of communal, you're on this journey together, or, you know, you're talking about individual points with a wider community of people, or even just kind of, you know kind of the vibe and you know what's happened. Because there's a lot of that to me that feels like with FF14, because, well, actually I'll talk about World of Warcraft first. So the thing that's interesting there is it's so much of it is data mined that actually, now some of this is flavored by obviously, you know, me doing what I do for work and stuff. It kind of forces me to stay ahead of the curve of like what's being, you know, happening narrative wise. But there's a lot of that, I think, that comes to the experience of like a core World of Warcraft player, where especially if you're here talking to us and interested. Obviously I've seen you about loads Unknown Character, but it's like that whole experience ends up being you're there with the community ahead of the game, because we're grabbing, seeing, and dissecting story points before they ever happen in the actual game as an experience. So actually playing through the content doesn't quite feel as good. The story is like kind of seen from a critical standpoint first rather than experiential one. Unless you're the kind of person who can experience it in isolation, that would be that, you know, good luck to you if you want to try that. I think that might be fine, but I think it's difficult in the kind of the big data mining, big, you know, if you want to consume content about World of Warcraft, you're almost certainly going to be spoiled. You have to put your head in the sand if you don't want to be spoiled. And I think that results in this kind of thing of, just a very different flavor to, oh yeah, you get to kind of play it, where I don't think the waiting of playing World of Warcraft is that important for the narrative. There's part of it's like enjoying the side quests, enjoying the zones, all of that, but like the grand narrative of what's actually happening in the story, you can kind of follow that without playing all that much because of how it's told through cutscenes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Primarily.
We'll have to see how they tackle that this expansion. I hope it's more in-game feeling.
Yeah, because then you look over to FF and you're like, well, you know, that's more of a thing where that's very experiential driven. No one knows what the story is. Everyone's really careful about like spoiling people, because the experience is strong, so you want to go through it at the same time other people are, so you can engage in like the whole wave of it moving. Whereas that's kind of not the case for World of Warcraft. I mean, it might have been a little bit in the past, but like you're not going to have just the same energy, the same vibe, the same feel of, oh yeah, we all like. I mean, I'm trying to think of the example that's really, really strong for me. Oh yeah, it was when Netflix dropped Stone Ocean in like one go. And that completely defeats the point of how you watch and experience a JoJo series with a group of people or with like the community of it, because there's so much like happens and so much kind of small mystery and anticipation setup that it's an okay experience enough in isolation, but you lose the whole culture aspect of it. And I think that's the thing, that World of Warcraft's culture of narrative isn't that really all that strong. Where you can kind of just not really bother if you want to be more touristy. Obviously the other part is, in terms of the actual gameplay, you miss all of the gameplay of the expansion. Because
Oh yeah, that bit.
because all of the raids are completely irrelevant and pointless, and you'll never do them again as they are. It's very much you miss out. I mean, you even miss out on a couple of weeks' basis in that kind of situation. But if you're the kind of person who wants to go back at the end of an expansion, then you must be very much the kind of person who will just kind of touristy do content. And then in that case, yeah. Also, in terms of the alpha looking impressive, we've seen very, 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 very little. What we have seen is pretty good, but there's
Absolutely, yeah.
in terms of large chunks of what the kind of content's like, it's like we have no sense for the narrative outside of it's a bit Azerothian and it's about dragons. With no real sense of what any of the end game is going to look or feel like in the balance perspective. We don't know how balanced the profession system is going to carry forward. We don't know how season 4 has happened and worked and balanced in Shadowlands, so we don't know how that will, if that is an avenue of improvement, if that'll continue. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot more for them to prove than, that's the way to put it. The onus of proof is on Blizzard for Dragonflight being an overall good experience worth playing as it comes out.
Yeah. I think they know that, so that's just going to be a thing of, honestly, just wait until launch.